Gig Gab, episode 543 for Monday, July 20th, National Fortune Cookie Day 2026. It's a day for everything, Freddy.
It's a new one on me.
Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians here in Durham, New Hampshire. As usual, I'm Dave Hamilton. Our sponsor today is Claude.ai/Gig Gab, where you can go and sign up, and that includes access to Claude Cowork, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. For now, my guest co-host this week has, let me see if I get this right, demoed some of audio's smartest tools on just about every trade show floor on the planet, NAB, AES, IBC, NAMM, and he's the reason I walked out of NAMM 2026 back in January, really fired up to make this episode happen. He's the product specialist at NUGEN Audio, the Leeds outfit behind the loudness and immersive tools that so many pros swear by. And word has it that he's a working musician and engineer himself. Freddy Vinehill-Cliffe, thank you for taking your time and joining the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this since we met at NAMM, so I'm glad we finally made it happen.
I am very glad we've finally made it happen. And you were demoing some software that really kind of blew me away. Tell me, let's start there.
Sure.
Explain what you were showing me, because this was a very cool thing.
Yeah, so the main thing we were demonstrating at NAMM this year was the latest version of our MasterCheck plugin. So MasterCheck is a plugin that allows you to hear how a track is going to sound on streaming services. So every streaming platform sounds slightly different. They might have slightly different codecs that they use for the data compression. They might have a different loudness normalization target that they use. Those are the two main things, but various factors.
Yeah.
So when you're working as a mixer or a mastering engineer or whatever it is, knowing that the main way people listen to music now is streaming, it's really important to make sure that your mixes or your masters are going to translate on as many different streaming services as possible. We're not advocating that people submit a different master for each platform. We're not suggesting that you have your Spotify master, your Tidal master, your Apple Music master, and so on. Ideally, you should still be submitting one master to all those platforms. But the idea is that by using MasterCheck, you can flag up if there's a particular issue that's coming from one of those platforms, and you can mitigate that ahead of time so you don't get a nasty surprise when you actually hear that track. Because that's the worst thing, if you don't have that information ahead of time, you aren't able to make those kind of informed decisions. Sure. You listen on Spotify on release day and you're like, hang on, this isn't my mix. So it's allowing you to audition the encoding process and the loudness normalization process of pretty much all the major streaming platforms.
No, this makes sense. I've noticed, and I've never been able to put my finger on it, although it seems to have gotten better in the last year, that everything on Spotify, the same track on, just as a listener of music, not even my own tracks, right? But listening to music, I noticed that Apple Music versus Spotify, the same track, there was something on Spotify's process that, for lack of a more articulate term, took the life out of most tracks. And I don't know what that was. But it seems like they changed something when they kind of redid all of their codecs and started offering lossless and all of that it started getting better. But I mean, it was 320K MP3. Like there's plenty of data there. Don't know why it was such a flat experience, but again, they compress it the way they compressed it. So
Yeah, I mean, it's curious because I've heard other people say the same thing.
okay, so I'm not crazy. Well,
You're not crazy.
not about that. Yeah.
Personally have never had a problem with the way that Spotify sounds.
Sure.
That's just me personally.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, so I often hear people talk about the way that Spotify compresses things. To my knowledge, certainly they use data compression, but there isn't. I think there's an implication that people think that they use some kind of dynamic compression. To my knowledge, they don't. I think if they so everything on Spotify is normalized to, I think it's -14 LUFS. If you have a track that you submit to Spotify that was mastered quieter than -14 LUFS, then they will have to limit that because they're gonna turn that up. There's gonna be a gain adjustment to turn that up to -14 LUFS, and then they're gonna have to limit that to stop it from clipping.
Yep.
So that's the only real situation where there would be any kind of dynamic processing, at least that I'm aware of.
Sure.
They're not 100% wholly transparent about everything that they do, so it's possible there might be something I'm not aware of, but to my knowledge, that's the only like dynamic compression that should be happening. But it's interesting you say it's improved.
It seems to, well, but now they've got lossless, so maybe it was something about the data compression side of it that was the issue. I have to laugh because in addition to spending my time at like music conferences, because I am in this business, I'm also in the general podcasting business. And so I go to podcast conferences, and to hear you say that, Spotify is not 100% transparent about everything is perhaps the understatement of the decade. Not so much about their algorithm of this, but when it comes to podcasting, they've gotten a lot of flack for being a walled garden. Different show, different topic, but I just had to laugh. Yeah. At the risk of being pedantic for what I know is my largely nerdy audience, nerdy about music, I think you touched on something that's important and also perfect for nerds like you and me to discuss. And I would love it if we can talk a little bit about the differences, and I know they are wholesale, between the two types of compression. You mentioned data compression versus dynamic compression. And so many times when I mention compression, if it's in music circles, people think it's dynamic compression, no matter what I'm talking about. And if it's in like my Mac podcast, my Mac Geek Gab podcast, nerdy circles, people think it's data compression, no matter what I'm talking about. So can I put you on the spot and ask you to articulate the differences between the two? I know they're very, very different, and I'm happy to help with this. But
yeah, I mean, I suppose data compression is not my field of expertise.
Fair enough.
I feel like I think I know what it is, but I'm not gonna try and embarrass myself by explaining that. But dynamic compression is very different in terms. So data compression, I guess the intent behind data compression is just to make a file smaller, but to still contain most of the same information, or at least all the important information.
Well, and that's the key, right? And you're right. Data compression, and we do it with images and music. And images, I think, are generally easier for people to understand, right? You've got a lossless image that is full quality, and then you take it and compress it down to a much smaller JPEG. If you've been in an image compression app before, you start moving that slider, and you can see literally with your eyes at some point it gets all pixelated, and that's data compression happening right there. You're literally taking it, like what you said was great. You're keeping the most important parts of the data, or perhaps all of the important parts of the data, but some of it is going away, and the algorithms that do the compression get better and better. requiring less and less data to reproduce the image enough to fool our eyes into thinking it's the real thing, right? And the same is true for music, although there is lossless compression in music too, right? There's Apple lossless codec, there's FLAC, which is another lossless codec, but it is data compression, because this is kind of where half of my nerd brain lives. To sum it up, data compression is taking the amount of data that you have, so the size of a file, and reducing it down while still keeping enough to represent the original source.
I think I mean, as I've sort of implied, that's definitely better than I would have been able to put it myself. But and then,
I got you.
Then,
we have each other. Yeah, that's right.
And then dynamic compression, which is specifically an audio thing, is the act of turning down audio above a certain threshold. So with a compressor, you might have a threshold of minus 10 dB. So that's 10 dB below what the maximum potential peak of the audio is. And then you set a ratio. You might set a ratio of 3:1, and essentially that means that anything that goes above that minus 10 dB threshold is going to be turned down down to about a third of what it was. So it doesn't mean that the whole signal gets turned down, but you get anything that goes above that, and it's a way of taming the level of a piece of audio. So, for example, I'm going to hazard a guess that on this podcast, probably both of our voices will be compressed to reduce the sort of the dynamic range of, how excitable we've both been so far.
Absolutely. Yep. And
so
actually, there's many levels of dynamic compression on this audio. There's each of our channels runs through compression, and then I have a master compressor that the entire mix goes through. Yep. And then when all of that is said and done, I actually feed the show through a service called Auphonic, which does even more compression and does some multi-band compression, which makes a difference when you're listening to spoken word like in a car versus somewhere else. So there's a lot of it. And then there is my signature trick that I learned years and years ago because I've been podcasting for too long. In fact, my oldest show just turned 21. I was one of the first podcasters to be doing this remotely. And I noticed that, your room sounds different than my room, even though we're using microphones that help mitigate room noise. It's still, there was some of that. So I actually dial in a little bit of reverb on the overall mix that puts us in the same room, but it's not enough. It's a taste of reverb. It's not so much. So anyway, but that's the audio signal path in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I get it. And it makes a lot of sense. I suspect that the room that I'm in is probably quite a bit more reflective than where you are. I am in the kitchen of my house, which is not the most ideal recording environment. Well, but it is just where I happen to find myself today.
At the risk of perhaps stepping on the toes of the company you work for, I leave. And if keen ears would have noticed when I did this, right after the recording of the episode started, I noticed that your sound was a little more reflective. And there was a little bit of a background noise thing that I was getting. So I always leave an instance of Waves NS1 plugin on every channel here. And when I hear that, Waves is great because it works in real time and is very, very, very low latency. NS1, I should say, it works in real time and is very, very low latency. I don't want to speak about every plugin they have. And it has one knob, and I just bring it up until the sound is clean, and then I stop touching it, and here we are. So
perfect. I mean, we don't make any kind of noise gate.
There you go.
So I've got no reason to be offended about you bringing up Waves. I should say as well that my wife has just come in the room, so I apologise if you can now hear her pottering about in the background. I thought she was going out, and here we are.
And here we are. It's totally fine. I did hear what sounded like maybe a a spoon on a teacup, but it's totally fine.
Something like that. Something like that.
Yeah. So it's all good.
That's life.
Yeah, well, and this is why I use all these nerdy things to clean up the sound, right? And I do want to go back to one thing. Thank you for joining me on that little exploration, because I think some people out there really appreciate it. I want to dig back in to that one piece of that, and that's compression ratios. You the way you described it, I loved. Because I think it's accurate. So I'm going to restate what I believe you said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You said with a ratio of, for example, 3-to-1, everything above the threshold is reduced relative to how far above the threshold it is, and the ratio is so for every 3 dB above the threshold, it goes. You get 1 dB if it's set to 3-to-1. Am I correct about that?
That's certainly my understanding.
Okay, great.
Again, it's funny, noise gates, compressors, two of the most common audio processors in the world. But a compressor is another thing that NUGEN don't make. A big part of our a big part of our philosophy is we will only make a new plugin if we can come up with our own sort of unique angle on that plugin. So we haven't yet come up with our own unique take on a compressor. Therefore, we're like, okay, well, we don't need to make a compressor. Like, we've got no interest in. It'll be very easy to feel tempted to make a compressor just because it seems like something that an audio plugin company should make. Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
We haven't come up with our own unique angle on that. Therefore, we haven't made one. So yeah, I feel like I'm fairly confident about my explanation of what the ratio does. But now I'm on the spot. I'm like,
I checked. I'm
second guessing myself.
I think we're both correct. I think we're both correct. The good
Imagine
news,
all the people writing in if we were both mistaken.
Well, that's
it.
Uproar. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com, and then on a future episode, I'll offer a correction. I've been doing technical podcasts for a very long time, and I've learned the value in wanting to be right in the future is more important than having been right in the past. And so I love getting things wrong because it means that I get to learn something.
Absolutely.
The worst part about getting something wrong is that I've misled someone. That's the negative. That's the downside, obviously. But I mean, I don't think we have. And if we have, well, just keep listening. So make sure you click subscribe so that you know in the future if we got it wrong, folks.
That's it. That's the best way of convincing someone to revisit the podcast is if you've listened to one episode, then you have to listen to every other episode forever.
That's right.
Just in case we got something wrong in the first episode that you listened to. And just to make sure you haven't been misled, you have to listen forever now.
That's right. That's right.
That's how it works.
Oh, I love this. We're having fun. I knew we would. I knew we would. Okay, let's. Oh man, I don't even know where to go with this. You are a gigging musician, yeah?
Yes.
And what instrument do you play? That was and how often do you play?
Before I answer the question, I really enjoyed the really pregnant pause before that, as if you were going to ask me a really controversial question.
No, I was just trying to think about where to go and when.
Listen, I know that people think it's embarrassing for a 33-year-old man to still be in a band. But, I kid. So I am still a gigging musician. I play in a couple of bands. The main one of those, I am a guitarist and vocalist in a band called Thank. That's like thanks, but without the S. And I also play bass in a band called Solderer. which I believe in America you would say solderer, like as in when you're like soldering or soldering a circuit. So we have played gigs with American bands, and they've been slightly confused about how to pronounce the name Solderer. But yeah, so Thank is the kind of main thing that I do. We tour fairly frequently. I would say as much as you can feasibly tour as a band who all have day jobs.
Yeah.
So we, generally speaking, in an average year, we'll probably do a couple of long weekends of shows in the UK, probably a full week of shows in mainland Europe, and then like a few kind of random one-offs here and there.
Wow.
And then Solderer, the band that I play bass in, that's a bit more of just a bit of fun, bit more of a mess about. Although we did just, with Solderer, we did just get back from a tour of Spain and Portugal, which was a lot of fun. I'm still fairly busy with gigs.
It sounds like it. I mean, that's an understatement. What type of music are each of the bands? Are they both original bands? Are you playing covers? What kind of stuff are you doing?
Both bands are playing originals.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Thank is kind of very synth-driven sort of noise rock / post-punk kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then Solderer is a bit more kind of out there, left field, kind of angular, art rocky kind of stuff. Very like atonal, not dissimilar to like Captain Beefheart or like US Maple, if that means anything to you.
Yeah.
That kind of very, very left of center. Very deliberately unappealing music, should we say?
Yeah, I understand.
Whereas Thank, although it's unappealing to some people, it does have an obvious appeal to other people. Whereas Solderer is very much just like, who is this for? And that's part of the joy.
Sure,
is that we're doing it solely for us. But yeah, like I say, we just got back from Spain and Portugal. We got the overnight ferry from the UK down to Spain, which is quite exciting. Our drummer got very, very seasick.
Oh, that sucks.
It does. It sucked for him. It was sort of entertaining, but no, that's cruel. That's cruel. I did feel very sorry for him.
Cruel, but true. Yeah, there you go. Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's fascinating. Who in the band books? Like, do you have external management? Do you book your tours? How does that all work?
So largely it is like DIY. I book most of the tours for both bands. With Thank, we do have a booking agent now, but we found ourselves in quite a lucky position where they help us out with bigger stuff if we're playing like outdoor festivals.
Sure.
Or like we're opening for like a bigger touring band, but then we still have the scope to book smaller DIY stuff ourselves. Whereas my understanding with a lot of kind of booking agents is once you're with them, they're like, we book all of your shows
It's
now.
exclusive,
and they might get a little bit shirty if you book other things alongside that. But yeah, the guys we work with are just like, they get it. They get what we're doing. They get that actually sometimes we want to go and play a week of shows in like squats across France and Belgium and Germany, and people booking shows in squats in France and Belgium and Germany aren't generally that amenable to working with a booking agent. They would consider that maybe, I don't know, too pro for them or whatever.
Interesting.
All these anarchists, they don't really want to deal with a booking agent. So yeah, we found ourselves in quite a nice, unique position. Where we can kind of have our cake and eat it, which is very nice.
That's as an independent band, I feel like that's, I always describe myself as a fiercely independent podcaster, and I'm also a fiercely independent musician. Like I respect that. That you need to be able to do what you want to do. And if you have management that is malleable and on board with your mission, then you've got a good, that's a good partnership. But if somebody's trying to control you in a way that you don't want to be controlled, right? Like it can be very nice in some ways to have somebody to offload the responsibility and say, okay, great, you figure it out. A tour manager that says, great, I'm going to tell you what time you need to like wake up so that you can be at sound check. That's awesome, right? Again, as long as you've sort of given them that role.
Totally.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it's, we like I say, we found ourselves in quite a unique position with it.
That's great.
But yeah, no, it's a good time. I mean, I've been, I guess, booking DIY tours since maybe 2014.
Wow.
And I think I've been good. I think I've been booking good tours since maybe 2018. There were a few years. There were a few years of definitely booking some train wrecks. But yeah, no, we have a good time. Do you gig much yourself?
I do. I gig. I gig sometimes too much. I can
relate.
Back in June, I was in Los Angeles. June was a crazy month. It started with me going to Los Angeles with my son to see the opening 2 nights of Rush's tour, and then the end of the month was my daughter's wedding, and in the middle, I forget. I'm losing count. I came back from LA, and on a Wednesday, and starting that Thursday, I think I had 5 gigs with 4 different bands in the course of like 6 days.
Wow.
Which was and one of them is a band I play with regularly, so I knew I knew the material. That was a gig I could simply show up for and play, right?
Yeah.
One of them was a sub gig that I had agreed to before any of these other things appeared on the schedule. Subbing for a friend's band. Their drummer had to go to a wedding. And so, but that meant learning, 30 songs, some of which I'd never played on stage before. And I didn't have time. I could choose between sitting down at my kit and playing the songs or sitting down and charting the songs. And I opted for charting. So there were a few of those tunes that I had literally never played until we were on stage together. I knew what I was doing. But
are you always a drummer in every band that you play with? Is that always your role?
Yeah, I also sing. I prefer to sing harmonies over leads, although I do occasionally find myself in the role of singing a lead here and there, which is fine. But yes, I am a drummer primarily. I've been playing piano longer than I've been playing drums, but not as proficiently. And I just haven't put in the same number of hours. And I'm a bad guitar player.
Got it.
Yeah, but functional on enough instruments. I think it's really important to for drummers especially, but I guess any musician really, to understand the piano. And maybe it's because it was my first instrument, but knowing like the best part about the piano is the staff and the keyboard have a one-to-one relationship, right? Unlike a guitar where you could play a C4 in like 3 different places, and it's like, well, why? Now you've got to make choices as to why you would choose one place over the other, and there are formulas for that probably are so ingrained in you that you don't even think about them anymore.
You might be overestimating my level of music theory here, but I'll take the compliment.
There you go. But I think being able to understand the piano makes it easy to see how things are all related to each other, and I think that's valuable.
I can see
for
that
a lot of reasons. Yeah,
I have a theory about drumming,
Okay.
And you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, because I'm not a drummer. So,
All right.
based on what you said, I'm getting the impression that most of the ensembles that you're playing with are doing like covers gigs. Is that
It's about half and half.
okay?
But yes, I play covers and I play in a couple of original bands as well. Yeah.
So my thing with drumming is playing the drums, like getting to a proficient level at the drums, seems to me to be, just in terms of the physicality of it, much harder than any other instrument. But if you can play the drums, like if you are a proficient drummer and you know what a song is supposed to sound like, you basically can play the song. Whereas like on other instruments, I'm not sure that that's true. Is that fair to say, or am I completely talking out of my something or other?
No, no offense. I'm not taking any offense to these. You
Yeah.
are correct. I would agree with that statement. There might be some drummers out there who are disagreeing vehemently. If so, feedback at giggabpodcast.com. We definitely want to hear from you. But
We
yes,
can put my address in the in the
There you go.
description under this, so they can come and knock on the door. Excuse me,
That's right.
Is Freddy in?
no,
I need to talk to him.
I think that's right. There is, I mean, there's the whole, coordinated uncoordination thing that you need to teach your brain and your body to play the drums. And I think at some level that is true for every instrument. But this stamina required to play a 2 or 3 hour gig on the drums is perhaps different than other instruments. I'm generalizing. I'm not sure that that's true. It depends on how you play the drums and how somebody else is on stage. But yes, once you reach a level of proficiency with the drums, being able to, as I like to say, play along with the radio in my head to fake it through a song is something that I believe is easier for drummers than it is for people who play other instruments. That said, I have had the pleasure of playing with a few guitar players who can do that and just like, oh, I think I remember, I've heard this song, and they'll play a chord structure that works, whether it's the correct chord structure or not. But something. My friend Matt Langley is the one coming to mind. A guitar player that actually used to live in New Hampshire. Now he lives in Florida most of the time. But we called him the human jukebox, and he could, like, somebody would just note a song and be like, yeah, we could play that, and he would have the lyrics in his head. Again, all from just having been exposed, the osmosis process, right? There was never an intention of, I need to figure this song out sitting down. It was like, yeah, I've heard that before, let's go. And
That's
he was
amazing.
It is amazing.
That feels quite out of reach for me.
It's atypical,
yeah.
right? Like most people can. I think I'm thinking of another person too. There's like maybe 3 people that I've encountered that have enough proficiency at that and confidence in themselves to be able to just do that. But by and large, otherwise, in general, yes, I think your assessment is correct that we drummers do have it easier when it comes to like learning 30 songs for a gig. Like sitting down and charting them is often enough for me to make it through with some level of conviction is the wrong word, of a convincing performance for the people around me. I would rather not do that. I mean, some people really like just faking it, and I do love sub gigs because you get to go and feel like Superman, right? As long as you don't completely train wreck everything, they're super happy with you, and you came in and you did the job, and I like that's wonderful. But I have more fun on stage if I am playing songs that I can do from memory, and I don't need to look at a chart, and I have some confidence with it, and I can, instead of being petrified that I'm going to miss a part of my own, I can get out of my own part and start thinking about what other people are playing and locking in with them. And like, that's when it gets more fun for me. And I mean, I think that's, probably true of most people.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But yeah, I can fake it. The drummers can fake it better.
Yeah. I suppose that maybe is the central thesis of what I'm saying is drummers can fake it better.
Yeah, or more easily. I don't know
Yeah.
if they can fake it better, but they can fake it more easily. Yeah.
I got married about 10 weeks ago.
Congratulations!
Thank
Amazing.
you very much. And the wedding band was because we're friends with so many musicians, and we weren't really interested in having like a typical wedding band like set list. We ended up just getting like a makeshift wedding band together made up of friends of ours. We had kind of a slightly fluid lineup. They did like a 45-minute set, and then we had a DJ after that. But it was like different people getting up for different songs, sort of slight variations on the same group of people. But they had, I think, 3 rehearsals to learn this 45-minute set, and none of them play in like covers bands.
Sure.
Generally, they all do they're all mainly like originals musicians, and I was in awe of that. I think I'm not wired to play other people's songs. That's just like not the way my brain works.
Yeah.
Writing songs comes quite easily and quite naturally to me, and I've been playing in bands since I was like 14, and it's always been like originals bands.
Sure.
Learning covers is something that I actually find really difficult. So that the fact that these guys were able to pull together this 45-minute set in 3 rehearsals was wild to me. I was very pleased and very impressed. But couldn't be me, I suppose is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it could not be me.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. There's a fantastic drummer and educator who has a fairly prominent online presence, a guy named Igoe. And he's very I don't know if he's from New York. I get the feeling that he is. He lives in Las Vegas now. But
Right.
he definitely, I grew up around New York. He definitely has that kind of opinionated New York City vibe to him. And I love it. And it's great for his personal brand and all this stuff. And he, talking about his students or talking to potential students, he said something along the lines of, I'm not going to teach you how to play drums in your original band. I'm going to teach you how to play drums to other people's music, because you can play whatever you want in your original band, and it is correct because it's your song, right? Like not that you want to play badly or anything, but there's whatever your vision of what it should sound like, and maybe your band's collective vision of what it should sound like is like, that's the mark to hit, right?
Sure, yeah.
Whereas when you're playing other people's music, be it, and I mean, the term covers, it gets talked about so specifically, but, playing on Broadway is also covering other people's music. Playing in an orchestra is covering other people's music. Like, usually, unless it's, you've composed something for an orchestra or composed something for Broadway, right? But there is I laughed when I saw him say this, because he's this opinionated New Yorker, and he had an attitude when he said it. I was like, yeah, okay, this makes sense. But it very much is what you're saying here, that it is a different skill set learning how to play. When you learn to play covers at a level where you're going to go put them on stage, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to sort of play along with your influences and in your in your home studio or basement or bedroom or wherever it is we all rehearse, but it's another when you're going to go put that out on stage and translate it into something that's going to work for the audience to recognize what you're playing. That's the key, and that is different from when you're in an original band and you say, oh, hey, I want to do, like, I love this song or whatever. The original band I was in college, we played a couple of covers, and they were things that happened organically, and one of them was Psycho Killer, Talking Heads tune. Our rendition of that sounded nothing like, I mean, you would know it was Psycho Killer, but there was no attempt to make it sound like the record or anything like it. It was, okay, here's this chord structure, here's the lyrics. Our bass player started it with this like funk slap kind of thing, and it was like, oh, that's interesting. And I think our singer was like, wait, that progression kind of works for Psycho Killer, and he sang it, and that became a song in our set. But that's different, right? That's almost like writing your own song and then cheating a little. I don't know. I mean, cheating's the wrong word, but you know, it like that's different than what I say when I'm playing cover music. And there's varying levels of this, and you know, there's much discussion over, well, is it a cover band? Is it a celebration of the band? Is it a tribute band? You know, and there's different levels of specificity that need to be hit for those kinds of things. But I always say at whatever level you're trying to hit there, really what you're doing is giving the audience enough to then fill in the blanks, the missing parts with the radio in their heads, right?
Yeah.
But that alone, it requires a different approach, right? Learning, I had a guitar player friend in Austin who was a seasoned cover band musician, and I knew him. I mean, I still know him, but when we were living near each other, it was about 30 years ago. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't learn everything. He's like, I listen to the song as an audience member and note which guitar parts jump out at me, and then those are the things I learn. The rest, I just am just playing chords underneath it because all they care about is the singer. It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
I was very impressed with our kind of makeshift wedding band.
Yeah.
Glenn Matthews, my friend who was playing the guitar, one of the songs that they did was Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel.
That's no joke.
And Glenn did the like panpipes part on guitar, like in the kind of middle section. And I was like, of course, because it's not as if we had someone playing the panpipes as part of the wedding band, and that's such an iconic part of the song. And I thought that was great that he can. And there were definitely parts of the song where he was kind of just vibing and just sort of, you know, very much downplaying it. But then that was like, that's an important moment of the song. The kind of panpipes thing. So someone needed to do it.
Somebody needed to plant the seed of it so that there was that recognizable hook. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is an interesting thing, and a lot of the kind of knowing your audience is also important for this, right? Because if you are playing, you know, I just did a yacht rock gig, right, and that music. That was it was 2 of the 6 gigs or whatever it was in those 5 days or whatever it worked out to be. And that music is terrifying for me, simply because of how easy it sounds and how smooth it must be played and how difficult those parts actually are for everybody, not just drummers, although I would argue that the drummer probably has it the hardest because you're playing like Porcaro and Gadd and, you know, both Murata brothers, and like, it's just crazy, right? You know, I was petrified doing that gig.
Especially if it's an audience where a lot of people know those songs like the back of their hand.
That's like, the thing. Half the audience... Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's like people who are really into, say, Steely Dan or whoever it is, really know those songs. People who are into Steely Dan, like, they know what that drum part is supposed to sound like.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, like Bernard Purdie or whoever it is playing on some of that. Like, people, like, there's like very specific grooves to that someone who's like a nerd for that kind of music is going to be listening out for, and potentially also is going to be quite cross if you're not doing it.
If you're not doing it right, that's exactly what it was. I would say, you know, half the audience was just there to enjoy these songs that they know from the radio, and I love that for them. And then, you know, the other half of the audience was there to enjoy these songs because they are nerds about these songs, right? Yeah. And that is the part that is simultaneously terrifying, and if you get it right, rewarding. And it's no surprise that you mentioned Steely Dan, but one of my favorite moments from one of the nights was playing Josie, the Steely Dan tune, which is so much more difficult than I realized. And it was put on the set list last minute. And I'm like, dude,
Oh, wow.
like, no. Like I've been working on, like, I've been playing Rosanna since January to get that groove smooth, and it's still not as smooth as I want it to be. And it's like, now you're just throwing Josie at me. Josie was the only song that I literally read sheet music and never took my eyes off it for the whole thing, and I was okay with it. But there's a weird break in the middle of that, which is an 11-beat break. It's essentially 3 measures of 4. 2 measures of 4 are complete silence. There's a gap, and then there's a 3-beat drum fill that sounds like it comes out of nowhere, because it does, and makes no sense. And then the band is in on beat 4, which is then beat 1 of the next measure. It's 2 measures of 4 and a measure of 3. And we got it. We talked it through in rehearsal, obviously, and everybody was on the same page. But still, it's one of these moments where it's like, this doesn't feel right, so I just have to go with what my brain is telling me is correct. And one of the nights we did it, I played the fill, and we all came in on the 1. And then there was one guy in the crowd who was like, woohoo! It's like, all right, he knew,
Yeah.
But if we had gotten it wrong, he also would have known,
Yeah. Well, it's so tough with things like that, those kind of unexpected rhythms that are like so key to a song.
Yes.
I know, I don't know if you're much of a Nirvana fan, but one of my favorite Nirvana songs is Milk It off the In Utero record.
Yeah.
And that's got the verses for that song have this thing going on where they're like, it almost feels like the drums are played like kind of a beat behind the actual meter of the song, and it works really well, and it ends up with this kind of like lolloping thing. But there's a band, I'm not going to name the band because I think that would be unkind of me.
Sure.
There's a band who released like a whole record of Nirvana covers.
Okay.
As like a fundraiser for something. I can't remember what.
Sure.
And most of it is great, but their version of Milk It, you can tell that the drummer and the bass player hadn't talked about that weird rhythmic thing beforehand. So I think it's like, I'm pretty sure it's like the drummer on their version of it doesn't do the kind of delayed downbeat thing. And then so the verse kind of starts with the bass playing as normal, and then it gets about halfway through the verse and you can kind of hear that there's some unease, and then the bass player kind of shifts to doing something that's more it's a bit of a train wreck basically. But for me, I think that it's just because I don't think they talked about it, and using that example of like the Josie thing. Actually, I mean, listen, I'm not suggesting it's like easy peasy, but like actually playing 3 bars, then having a 2-bar break, and then having like a 3 count before coming in, as long as everyone can count, that's not actually that. That's not that insane.
It's unexpected. And the way they played it, it doesn't. There's nothing about it that gives you a hint as to what is happening. You realize it after the fact, and so it's jarring, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was intentionally jarring or if when they were splicing tape together in the studio that happened, and they said, "Actually, you know what? That's great. Leave it."
Yeah,
like you don't know.
I can't imagine those guys living with a mistake like that.
Fair.
Donald Fagen's not living with that.
No, he's not. But like that, fair. But it's one of those things that when you hear it, you're like, hang on a second, what? Mm-hmm. But you're right. Like once you figure it out, then it's like, oh, okay, well that's easy. Yes, you're right. But a groove feel thing that it all just requires attention and intention, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You were talking about like understanding your audience and things like that. Do you this is maybe my sort of inner sadist, but do you ever have the enjoyment of Or do you ever find yourself relishing playing a gig and realizing that this is absolutely not the audience for what we're doing, but we're just doing it anyway? The drummer who plays in Solderer with me, and we've done a few bands together over the years, his favourite gigs are like when we turn up at some pub in the middle of nowhere, and it very much turns out to be like a locals vibe.
Yeah.
And 2/3 of the people in the room have no idea what you're doing. Those are like his favourite gigs. But we played one recently. We played a festival in like a festival in the Portuguese countryside that was very much like full of kind of I guess hippies broadly would be the thing, but it had mostly been very nice music, very competent, very nice, like kind of jangly indie rock throughout the day. And we played at about 10 or 11 p.m. I think, and I later found out that a significant chunk of the crowd were at the peak of a mushroom trip at this point as well.
Oh, nice.
We played, but like they'd had this day of very, very nice music, and we came on and did our sort of deconstructed Captain Beefheart thing. Our vocalist has some like crazy pitch shifting going on her voice as well. And like that, I feel was, I mean, we had a good time and it went well, but I feel that 200 hippies who were in the middle of a trip were not the were not the right audience for that. But I kind of love relishing that sometimes, of like, this is like these two things, the band and the audience, are not necessarily matching up, but let's enjoy that for what it is.
Yeah,
and kind of just lean into that and enjoy the chaos.
Embrace the chaos. I usually in those moments, I do love those moments when you realize, okay, this is whoever put this together, it was the wrong fit. And it might have been us, right? Like it might be our fault, but it doesn't matter. Like, this is the reality of this moment. We can, debrief later about how and why this happened and whether it should happen again. But in this moment, we're just playing. And in my head, there's two things that go through. One is I want to play and perform the best that I can, because you never know. Even if 99% of the audience hates it, there's 1% that might be into it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just as much playing the songs, the best that we can, delivering, committing to it, not being shy about this just because it's the wrong thing, but also making sure the sound is good. Like, all of those things are what go through my head in those moments, because I want to deliver the best product, especially because we probably don't have a forgiving audience, right? And we're going to give them, they might not like our best, but we are going to give it to them, right? And we're not going to give them a reason to dislike us other than the core of that, which is us, right? Or our music anyway. They don't know us, but
and sometimes that's the best thing as well, is winning people over when you have that kind of that adversarial start to a gig.
Yes,
and then actually getting partway through and winning people over. That's a great feeling. That
was the second part of what's going through my head, is like, we can melt this particular brand of ice. Like, we'll find a way to get into their hearts, whether they want us to or not. And that, to me, that's always the mission. There is, do the level best we can. I will say, mushrooms can, when the audience is on mushrooms, can really help. I played in a band in college that did fairly well. We were sort of the largest, the most popular band at our university, which is the University of Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And, we were an original band. This was the band that wound up playing Psycho Killer, a band called Go Figure. And we, our gigs would get 100, 150 people, which is not bad for, we had a following. We could sell T-shirts and CDs, and people were into it. And then we were invited to become the house band for this series of parties that were called Gathering of the Vibes or Gathering of the Tribes or something, I don't know, that where the idea was people were going to come to the party and eat a bunch of mushrooms, and the band would play. And suddenly we started doing these gigs, and then suddenly our following started growing really, really quickly. And it took me about 20 years when telling the story about actually I was telling the story about how the Grateful Dead basically followed the same path, right? Like they were initially their tours were funded by Owsley Stanley because he wanted to sell his LSD and have cover essentially to do that.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Grateful Dead deserve all of the success that they have had, but it was started at these parties that the electric Kool-Aid acid tests that Ken Kesey would have, and then Owsley wanted to spread his market, and so he funded their tours. And
incredible.
But what happened in both cases, one with a little more lasting success than the other, was that the crowd conflated this experience that they had with the band that happened to be playing while they had this experience, right? And like I said, then we were playing gigs for 1,000 people. I was like, wow, this is amazing, and it was amazing, and I loved it. But it was just a really like that particular shortcut. Was lost on me at the time that was, at least a healthy part of the reason, sizable part, maybe healthy or not, we can have a different discussion about that. But it was certainly a sizable part of the reason that that band started growing as it did,
Sure.
But that can help. And I mean, I actually think alcohol and live music are two things that don't really go well together, because people, when they have alcohol, what they want to do is they want to tell stories and talk. Not that we've had alcohol. I'm not implying that anybody. I don't know. I know that I haven't. That's all, folks.
I can confirm that I haven't.
There you go.
I can.
But it's not the worst thing either. I know podcasters who do, and within reason, it all works. But yeah, depending on the experience, an audience member's like grand sum total of their experience at your show is what they take home with them. And I'm not sitting here saying, you got to give your audience members mushrooms, but you need to throw them a party, and you need to understand that that's what you're doing for them. And their experience watching your music is part of it, but so is their experience with the people around them. And, do they feel like they're part of a community? And if so, that's going to make it way easier for them to want to come back. Like, oh, I loved that. The moments when the band's not playing are just as important as the moments when the band is playing. And I think there's a big lesson there in really creating a community as best you can for your following, and create the opportunity for community. There it is. I think it's really important. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. Do we have anything else to talk about, Freddie? Well, let me put it this way. I know we have a huge, long list of things to talk about that we didn't even touch. And I love that. And that tells me we definitely need to do this again sometime. But before we go, is there anything else you would like to talk about today?
Good question. Yeah, similarly, I'm entirely at peace with the fact that we've not followed the notes that we made at all. That I'd be more than happy to come back.
Great.
I guess maybe just to mention, well, how soon will this be being broadcast?
We are recording this at the tail end of June, and it will come out on July 20th. So three weeks gap. Yeah.
In that case, perhaps it is just worth me mentioning that by the time this episode comes out, we will have a special offer on NUGEN. We'll be doing 30% off a bunch of our plugins. It's a Stereoizer, which is our stereo width plugin, Stereo Placer, which is our frequency-specific panning tool, Mono Filter, which is our bass management plugin, and Paragon ST, which is our stereo reverb. All of those are going to be 30% off, I think, until the 17th of August. If you go to our website, which is nugenaudio.com, then you can find out more about that. And yeah, it's starting on the 13th of July, I think.
Okay,
so by
perfect.
the time people hear this,
It's
that'll
all
be well
it's already
underway.
rolling. Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably the only thing that I'm contractually obligated to to include.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. That I love that. The right plugins for the right time, as we've already discussed in the episode. I mean, you got to have what you got to have.
Absolutely.
I know all of those plugins are your favorites for different reasons. Anything about any one or more of those that you want to take a minute to highlight here? Because I'm always eager to learn about this stuff. So, which is really the reason I invited you on the show. And then we talked about being gigging musicians, which is actually the reason for the show. So there you go.
Life is all about light and shade, Dave.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess the one that I always feel like is overlooked is Stereo Placer. Out of those plugins that I mentioned, Stereo Placer is a frequency-specific panning tool, and what that means is essentially it looks like an EQ, but when you zone in on a particular frequency band, instead of making that frequency band louder or quieter, you're actually moving that frequency left or right without affecting the stereo image of the rest of the frequency range. You can use that just as a really weird effect is one thing.
Sure.
You can also use it, for example, like a big use case that I always bring up is if you're mixing a performance that was recorded by someone else, and maybe you don't love the mic placement. Say you've got like the drum overheads and you actually want a bit more width on the drum overheads. What you could do, for example, is you could zone in on the fundamental frequency of the hi-hat and move that further left so that it gives a wider impression of the width of the kit without affecting the rest of the frequency range. Or you could even, for example, you could use it if you have a mono recording of a piano and you want to give the impression of it being in stereo, you could use a stereo width plugin. There are stereo width plugins
for sure
that can go from mono to stereo, including Stereoizer, one of the other plugins I mentioned. But with Stereo Placer, what you could do is take the low frequencies, which on a piano are obviously the low notes, which are on one side, and pan those one way, leave the kind of middle frequencies in the middle, and pan the high frequencies the other way, and then you're able to create a phase coherent stereo image of the piano, having only recorded it with one mono microphone. So yeah, that's a plugin that I think gets overlooked because I think there isn't always an obvious use case for it. It's not the kind of plugin that you're going to use on every session. It's something that you're only going to use when you really need it. But when you do need it, there's not really anything else that does the same thing. So that's one that I want to give a bit of a plug to.
No, I'm glad you mentioned this. When I do these podcast recordings, if I have more than one guest, the audio that I get because of the engine that I use called StreamYard, I get one channel from you, right? Like you are coming into one channel. But if there was someone else on the show, both of you would be coming into that same channel. And I've begged and pleaded with StreamYard to expose another endpoint for that because it's there. But they don't give it to me. So I get one thing. And I mentioned earlier that reverb was kind of my trick. I actually do release in stereo, and we are ever so slightly left and right of center when just to make it a little easy. It's not hard panned. In fact, most people that are listening probably, even if you've listened to all 500 and whatever episodes, you didn't notice, and that's the point. But it just allows the brain, it's more for your brain than your ears, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Just to give a little bit of separation. If we wind up talking over each other a little bit, you've got some directionality to it because our brains are really good at that.
Sure.
And more than we notice, right? So we're, a couple of degrees off from each other. But if I had two people on, then they are both at the same point in that stereo field. I'm wondering, and this stereo placer, I'm going to experiment with it. Could I if their voices had a slightly different fundamental frequency, could I split them enough that I might be able to get some separation between the two? I don't know, but it's worth experimenting with. Yeah, I think so too.
Could.
Yeah.
I think as long as their voices weren't too similar in terms of like fundamentals, then I think that would be a good way of doing it. And I'd be interested to hear your findings on that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because I love it. Like I did an episode recently where it was 3 people, but two of us were local here in my studio. So for that, of course, I now I have a separate channel for everybody, which is all I need. But yeah, interesting.
Well, wow.
So
there we go. Well, even if this just makes one sale, i.e. you buying Stereo Placer.
There you go.
Then it was worth me coming on, wasn't it?
That's right. That's right.
It was a pleasure, and to be clear, I will probably just send you a license of Stereo Placer as a thank you for having me on the show. But
thank you. That was not the reason I brought it up.
Oh no, I know it wasn't. But
my nerd brain was going too quickly for me to stop and think about that. But thank you. Yeah, and thank you for coming on. Where can people follow NUGEN Audio and you, or wherever you want people to find you? Please share, and I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes. Yeah.
So I'm just going to go with Instagram because that feels like the main place that people look at things now. So you can follow NUGEN Audio at NUGEN Audio. So that's NUGEN Audio, all one word. Yep. The main band that I play with is Thank. You can find us at Thank Leads, again, all one word. You can find me at FSVC with 4 underscores after it. That's a bit more difficult. I make myself slightly more difficult to find. But here I am telling you anyway. Also my kind of audio account is at Loudness War Draft Dodger.
Love that.
So, those are probably the 4. NUGEN Audio, Thank Leads, FSVC, Loudness War Draft Dodger. I'm all over the internet. So,
that's great.
Look.
Love it. Love it. Freddie, thank you so much for taking your time. This has been what an absolute blast. One last thing before we go. There are 3 words that we use as our mantra here and have for years. I've certainly said them more times than I can count. And for that reason and many others, it would be my honor if you would send everyone off with these 3 words, and you can say them however you would like. And if you don't want to do it, I'll do it because, why not? So, but the floor is yours. Yes.
Your wish is my command. Always be performing.
Love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Folks, thanks for listening. Make sure to follow Gig Gab Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And, of course, giggabpodcast.com for the show notes and all the links to Freddie and NUGEN and Thank and all the good stuff. So thanks for hanging out, folks. We'll see you next week.